It all started with a very simple idea. Tell the stories of how successful middle market CEOs made it to the corner office. I'm Brant Handley, founder and managing director of Resource Options International, or ROI. We're the USA's premier executive search firm focused exclusively on empowering middle market companies to attract, hire, and retain A players while transforming top executives' careers and lives. ROI's Into the Corner office is dedicated to discovering how middle market CEOs advance their career, and we're making these remarkable and sometimes quite unbelievable stories available to you for the very first time. Listen and learn about the challenges they've overcome, the interesting people they've met along the way, and the lessons learned that steered these executives' unique journey into a middle market corner office of their own. I know you enjoy these CEO stories as much as I've enjoyed recording them, so thank you for listening today. And if you like what you've heard, rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next great middle market CEO adventure into the corner office. Today, my guest is Bianca Padilla, CEO and co-founder of Carewell. Carewell is a family-founded company that simplifies life for caregivers by providing personalized service, compassionate content, and expert-vetted home care products. A graduate of New York University with a BA in economics, Bianca attended the Disney Institute and formed the Charlotte chapter of Aging 2.0. Prior to founding Carewell, Bianca worked as a software engineer at LiveNinja and as an analyst for CCMP Capital Advisors and Pantheon Ventures. A Miami native, Bianca enjoys spending time with her co-founder husband Jonathan and toy poodle Henry, traveling, being an unabashed foodie, and reading books about entrepreneurship, leadership, tech, and comedy. Bianca Padilla, welcome into the corner office.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's great to hear your voice again. We spoke a couple of weeks ago, and I know a storm is approaching in Miami, so let's hope it doesn't give us too much harm. But with that aside, how are things going down in Florida? We've heard so much about the pandemic, and it seems like Florida is the epicenter again. How are you? How's your family? And more importantly, how are all the employees at Carewell?
We're good. I'm actually in the mountains in North Carolina, which is why my internet could be spotty up here. I actually left Florida because, COVID's getting really, really bad.
Right.
And I want to make sure that I'm safe and sound, and
it's
harder to catch COVID when you're far away from people.
That's right. Well, I'm sure it's beautiful up there. Well, and I'm glad that things are going well, and I'm sure this has been a very busy time, and I want to talk about Carewell and the great stuff that you're doing. But let's start a little bit with you. Tell us a little bit about your early years, where you grew up and what your early family life was like.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up born and raised in Miami, Florida, and came from a pretty normal background. As you can imagine, in Miami, many people are Hispanic and specifically Cuban. So I happen to be a Cuban American, first generation.
First generation, second generation, third generation.
First generation.
First generation, cool.
Anyways, so yeah, born and raised in Miami, and had a pretty normal life. Went to graduated high school, ended up going to NYU. For college and studying economics and business while I was there. Initially, I actually thought that I would go into finance, and I had done a few internships in private equity. And after spending a few summers, I realized, my real calling ever since I was a kid was really, I wanted to start my own company. I wanted to make a difference in that way. And so after I graduated from college, I ended up going to a coding boot camp to learn software engineering. And I took my first job as a software engineer. I knew if I wanted to start a company, I'm going to need to know how to manage engineering teams, because we're in the world of technology now.
Absolutely.
And about a year later, actually, a few weeks on the job, I ended up going on a first date with my now husband, Jonathan.
Right,
and on that first date is actually where we conceptualized the idea for Carewell. Where he brought up to me the idea of an adult diaper subscription service, and I fell in love with it. I had, and I'm sure you'll ask me about this later, but I had some personal experience in caregiving and watching my mom do it and trying to help her, and so I thought it was a really neat idea, really unique, massive market, and we ended up partnering together and going on that journey, and that's how we built Carewell.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I want to get into that a little bit, but I want to talk a little bit more about the early years. Now, mom and dad immigrated from Cuba originally?
Yes. Yep. So my dad
it.
actually got here. Actually, my mom was born in New Jersey. She was the first of her parents' children to be born here.
Yeah.
And then my dad moved here when he was 12 or 14 years old. So he ended up going from Cuba to Spain, spending some time there. That was one of the only places they could go at the time. And then coming to once the rest of our family came to Miami, he ended up joining or reconvening with their family later on.
Awesome. Brothers and sisters?
Yep, I've got 2 sisters, one who's closer in my age and one who's 6 or 7 years old right now.
All right. Cool. And mom and dad, what kind of careers did they have? Were they entrepreneurs like you've turned out to be?
Yep. So my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and my dad was an entrepreneur in Latin America. So we spent many summers between Venezuela, Panama, Colombia, where he was operating businesses, and
awesome.
That was one of the great things about my life, is I got to see that. I got to he would take us, me and my sister Victoria, who's closer in my age, to China, to the World Trade Fair, and a bunch of really unique experiences that just really opened my eyes to the possibilities, and something that I'm really thankful for today.
Now, we talked a little bit about your university degree. Did you do all your secondary schooling in Miami? Did you grow up in the public schools there, or did you get educated outside?
No, I was educated in Miami. So born, raised, and went all through secondary school, and then ended up, like I said, graduating and going to NYU.
Yeah, awesome. What about entrepreneurial things as a kid? Did you explore some of those early on?
Oh, ever since I was 6, 7 years old, since I can remember.
Cool.
And there's plenty of stories, that my family loves to tell, and pictures. But I mean, early on, from car washes to selling Pokemon cards door to door. In 8th grade, I actually, if you've ever seen the television series, it's like a kids show called Recess.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So one of the characters has like a jacket where he opens up and he's like sells all these watches and things like that. So I actually invented that during my 7th or 8th grade year in middle school, and I pinned a bunch of candy to the inside of my school jacket, and so I would sell that at school. And then in high school, I ended up doing a few kind of entrepreneurial things through some prom parties and things like that. So it was just really fun, and definitely realized after that I did not want to go into event planning. Incredibly stressful, and you don't get to really enjoy the night. But allowed me to help save some money, because I always knew I wanted to start my own company at one point or another.
So did you save? Did you set that aside, or were there things that you explored with it?
Yeah, no, I've always been a huge saver.
Yeah.
The joke in my family is that they'd take me to Toys R Us and I wouldn't pick anything. It was not the type of kid who liked to spend money. I always just would say like, oh, can I just have the cash? Which is weird, because what was I doing with it? I don't know, but I just always wanted to have it just so that I can use it always for a future business or a company.
Sure. Well, how did you make your decision about what college to go to? Because I think you obviously, as you mentioned earlier, you came up to New York, and that was a big shift, obviously, geographically. What drew you up here?
Gosh, so NYU is my first choice. I applied early action, which is basically like a non-binding decision. You find out, prior to having to apply to any other school, whether you got in or not.
Right.
And so that was really nice, because then I got in, I saved a bunch of money on application fees, and pretty much set the path. But there was a few things that attracted me to NYU. One, the alumni. There were a bunch of different people, from entrepreneurs to successful kind of public figures that went there, right? I mean, I think it's like the most famous school in the world, or has the most applicants or something. So obviously it's well known. But two, they had these few programs that I thought were really unique. They had, this theater school. They had a really great business school. They have this school called Gallatin, which you can create your own major. And so given kind of the nature of who I am, I always wanted to have as much flexibility, as much options to explore and see, what I would like.
Right.
I knew that I didn't necessarily have to go to school for business to go into and run a business,
Right.
that it would be helpful. I learned that just, being around my dad and being around other people who run businesses, many of them, it's a type of job that you learn on the job.
Sure.
So I ended up going very traditionally, either way, all these options. And of course, I ended up choosing economics because the first few courses, I just fell in love. I didn't even know what economics was. I'd never taken a class. And so, I took, I think it was like macroeconomics 101. I loved the professor, and I just loved the concepts behind economics, and ended up choosing that. And I minored in business because I knew I wanted to take some formal kind of accounting and finance classes that I knew would be beneficial. And kind of my dad always was very big proponent of understanding your three financial statements and how they work and making sure you can audit them yourself. So that was kind of the path there.
Did your entrepreneurial activities follow you to NYU? Were you involved in things during college days as well?
Yes, of course. Absolutely.
And tell us about some of those.
So I always had a job throughout college. My first job was like in retail. I worked at actually one of the Kardashian stores called Dash. I was a Dash doll there, which was fun. You get to meet a lot of different people who walk through those stores, and I ended up kind of managing their social media for a little while. And then after that, I ended up starting, I guess, my first startup company in college, just the summer after. And I met really great friend of mine now and mentor, but he was my first boss. His name's Jeremy. And essentially, I had pitched this idea during a kind of business competition that I literally came up with on the spot, and it was Stasher, and it was an app for kids to stash their cash. And since I was a kid who loved, saving and making money, I figured, well, it kind of sucks that I never really had access to a bank account. I never really, could check how much money I had. It was just, in this faraway place that I never really knew about. And I had my godson at the time who was maybe 7 or 8. And, every time I sent him money, I was like, well, I really hope it's going to his bank account. Who knows what he's spending it on or what he's doing, And that's kind of how I conceptualized that idea, and ended up, my friend Jeremy ended up being the first investor. And
so it was kind of a savings
co-founder.
plan for others. Is that kind of how it worked?
Yeah, it was. So you would have chores. So it was like a bank account for kids, but you'd have chores that would be tied to incentives, right? Whether it's $1, $2, or TV time and things like that. So you can incentivize your kids to work hard and be rewarded for it. And then it was really tailored to the kids, so it looked fun. It had like a ninja bear and a bunch of stuff, so that the kids actually wanted to use it. Ended up failing. Within a year or two, primarily because we just didn't know how to manage the engineering team. And so that's...
Did you outsource that, or what was your...
Yeah, we outsourced it, and we didn't understand anything about the development process or, how to QA or anything like that. And so we ran into a bunch of issues, and, ultimately I decided, listen, if I want to start a company, I really have to learn engineering. I've got to learn how the technology works so I can at least manage and understand what is going on. And so when I graduated, rather than taking a job in finance, I went and I took a software engineering course. And that's how I got my first job as a software engineer.
Awesome. And who was that with?
So that was with the company LiveNinja. They were purchased a few years back by another company. And it was like the quintessential Miami startup. We used to have like Waffle Wednesdays at the office, where the startup community, would kind of come every Wednesday, and it was really an awesome experience, and loved the guys who ran and sold that business. And they're still in Miami and major part of the Miami tech scene.
Right, cool. And did you manage people in that position as well, or did that come a little bit later in your career as it developed?
Yeah, no, I was, I was a junior engineer, so I did not manage anybody. That leadership component, that management component, definitely came at Carewell.
Got it. So during the year you were there, is that when you met Jonathan, your husband, the
Yep.
co-founder?
So I think
Okay.
3-4 weeks on the job,
Yeah.
he asked me out on a date through a Facebook Messenger text, I guess.
So he wasn't
Bef-
at LiveNinja as well.
he
He
was
was
not at
elsewhere.
LiveNinja,
Okay.
no.
Got it. Got it.
He knew some of the people who worked there because Miami's a small kind of community,
Sure. Sure.
and we hit it off.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about kind of how the concept came up, because obviously it's a little bit different than, what you had done, in your early work experience and some of the entrepreneurial things. Did you always kind of have a soft spot for helping and caring for people? Was that kind of how you got into it? Did you see a need? Give us a little bit of the impetus around Carewell.
Yeah, absolutely. So it really started the idea for it, or the need, I guess, I had recognized when I moved back home from college, and my grandmother had surgery and was in a kind of rehabilitation center, and
Mm.
then we had to bring her home. And
Mm.
so when we brought her home, it was really challenging. I mean, it was up to my mom, who had recently gone back to work, and who was still caring for my younger sister who was in high school, and it was causing major strain having to care for someone, having to
Yeah.
figure out what products they needed, making sure she got the right nutrition and was taking all the medicines.
Mm.
So obviously, I saw this, and I offered to help. And so immediately, I went online as a millennial and looked for resources and looked for which products we should be buying, and I was just completely shocked that
Mm.
there was nothing for family caregivers. And I'd mentioned earlier I'd worked in private equity, and I spent some time on a healthcare team, and I
Right.
knew, that the 65 plus demographic was, getting bigger and bigger every day. I think it's
Right.
10,000 new 65 plus year olds enter into that age range every single day.
Right.
And so I was, shocked that there wasn't anything
Mm.
like a baby center or guides or blogs like there is for newborns for
Right.
the aging population, right? Because there's going to be more 65-year-olds plus or seniors than there are under the age of 18.
That's right. Yeah.
So that's kind of what the idea for it. And then when John mentioned on our first date that he came up with this idea and won a hackathon over it
Mm.
for an adult diaper subscription service, I thought, oh my gosh, that's brilliant, because I'm going through that right now. I
Yeah.
understand the pain. I understand, how many questions there are, and just how overwhelming and stressful it can be. And I think that there really is a need here. It's a massive market. Can we do this together?
Is it a
And
product need? Is it an information need? Because I mean, these products have been around for a while. Was
yeah,
it just a question of making sure that the caregivers had the information? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's I always say it's similar to kind of like a Chewy.com, but even more of a high touch personalized approach.
Got it.
So the products exist, but if you go, you've never heard about these home healthcare products, likely,
Right.
right?
Right.
You're new to
Very
caregiving.
specialized, probably in different parts of the store, or
Yep.
specialty stores, I would
And
imagine,
there's
for the most
specialty
part.
stores. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
gonna say next. You
Yeah.
you just can't go into your local pharmacy. They
Right.
don't have that selection.
Yeah.
So you're kind of forced to go to these one-off specialty stores that are inconvenient and they're very expensive, or you go online, and
Right.
online there's no one to help you.
Yeah.
There's no one to ask questions to. There's no one to guide you, and that was the need and my need that I had when I was searching
Right.
online.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what was shocking to me was that there was no player yet. There was a
Hmm.
lot of these kind of niche, lower quality kind of experience. There were, 20, 30-year-old businesses that had thrown up a website. There was really no focus around the customer experience and personalized service and support. And so that was really the idea behind Carewell. It wasn't so much a subscription service. It
Sure.
was really about creating that one-stop shop
Yeah.
where you can come to us, you can ask us what it is that you need. We'll make those expert recommendations, and you can be on your way and feel confident in what you purchased. And if you don't know how to use them when you get home, you can also call us
Right.
back, and we'll show you how to do it.
Awesome. Yeah.
So a lot of hand holding. And part of this year, we're relaunching our resource center and coming out with thousands of articles that are very actionable. So they'll tell you, here's what you need to buy, here's how to make your purchasing decision, here are the important features to consider, as well as checklists of things that you should have. And
so, Bianca, do you actually take title to products as well and act as a distributor, or are you more providing recommendations to people as to where to get the products they need?
Yeah, it's both. We
Okay.
make the recommendations, and we also ship out the actual products and the orders.
Right. Cool. And then the information that you provide, it's kind of like a community then. People can come in and read blogs and kind of get additional information. Is that kind of also part of the plan?
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
the thing that's most important and unique to our business is really our customer care team. So we've
Right.
got this team of trained experts who go through 3 weeks of empathy and product training,
Oh, wow.
and they're the ones who actually 20% of our revenue comes in over the phone, and that is just
Wow.
completely different to any e-commerce company where
Sure.
less than 1% of orders come in via the phone, and
Yeah.
that's really because people need that guidance and they want to feel that support and that they're
Right.
doing the right thing, right? Because you're caring for somebody who you love so much, you want to make sure you're making the right
Yeah.
decision.
Yeah.
Um,
Awesome.
and we're also able to save them a lot of time, right? Sometimes if you don't have the time to go online and try to figure this out yourself, it's really nice to be able to pick up the phone and say, hey, this is the issue I'm having. Please
Right.
make a recommendation to me.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
people, they take that option very often, as you can tell with that 20% of revenue.
Sure. And it's all remote. Is it Zoom connection as well? Is it audio, combination of both? How can people connect with Carewell?
Yeah, it's phone and it's SMS and email,
Right. Okay.
and
Cool.
Facebook Messenger as well.
Yeah. Great. And how many customer service reps, or what do you call your staff, the folks out in the field helping all these great people?
It's our customer care team,
Customer
and
care
we
team.
have
Yeah.
about 30 or 35 now. That number is growing every
Awesome.
week.
Yeah. Fantastic. And U.S. only for the moment, or do you also do some international support?
Yep, so all US-based customer service,
Right.
trained all by us, and like I said, it's a very vigorous process to even be selected as a customer care agent. And so we're
Yeah.
very, very careful with who we hire. You've
Right.
got to be not only great at customer service, but you've got to be a highly empathetic individual.
Yeah.
And then like I said, we go through that 3 weeks of training with that empathy training, and a lot of it actually comes from a lot of that training comes from the fact that John and I, who's my co-founder and husband, went through the Disney Institute.
Yeah. I
And
was going to ask you
so,
about that. So
yeah,
tell us a little bit about that. When did you two do that?
so we did that, God, maybe 2017 or 18,
Okay.
right when we were starting to figure out, okay, how are we going to scale this team? How do we ensure consistency, when we have 10 agents, 50 agents, 1,000 agents,
Right.
et cetera.
Right.
And so we thought, okay, let's think about some companies that do this really well at scale, and let's see if they offer
Yeah.
classes. And so we were looking at Disney Institute, we were looking at the Ritz, and we felt that Disney was a little bit more like what we do. So we ended up going and taking this week-long course there in Orlando,
Mm.
and learning about how to build the proper procedures, policies, training, hiring programs to ensure that you can scale quality service. And it was a really unique opportunity.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it was actually, we were going to start sending, our best agents to go, but then COVID hit,
Oh,
and so we
right.
haven't been
Yeah.
able to do that.
Ah.
But we do have a few hires that we've made from Disney. So many of them have actually gone through that program because it's the program that Disney, if you're an employee there,
Right.
requires everybody to go through.
Yeah.
So it's really
Cool.
unique, and so a lot of the findings that we learned there, we've implemented from day one.
Well, that's a very good model to work from. I worked for Disney for 10 years and ended
Oh,
up in
wow.
Orlando. Yeah,
Oh
and
my gosh.
worked with a lot of people from the Institute, so I remember seeing that in your background. Oh, that's awesome. Well, now you and John run the show. You're both co-founders. How do you kind of divide and conquer? There's a lot of other folks that are husband and wife teams that are perhaps listening and saying, yeah, okay, so what are some of the issues that you guys face and how do you resolve them? But let's start first with kind of the responsibilities. How do you guys divide and conquer on the job?
Sure. So I'm more of like the growth person, right? So I'm
Okay.
thinking all the time about product, marketing, merchandising, and engineering. And then
Right.
John does all of the what I would consider, I don't know, back office type things that make
Okay.
sure that one, we don't get into
Operations.
trouble. Yep.
Yeah.
That we are paying our
Compliance. Yeah.
taxes, that where
Right.
people are getting paid, all of that. That makes sure the engine is going and we don't run into any problems. That's what he takes care of.
Yeah.
So
Cool.
it's, a lot of times it's like we don't talk to each other all day because we manage
Right.
completely separate teams.
Right.
And I guess maybe that's one of the reasons why it works so well. But also I think we're so different from each other.
Hmm.
We always say it's like fire and ice, and so that
Right.
really helps us, kind of balance the job, the responsibilities, the pressures as well of running a really fast growing company.
Well, you said you're very selective, obviously, with the people that you hire, and many of the folks that are listening, of course, are very interested about how you go about doing that. One of the questions I get asked so often is, how do you pick good people? So I'm going to ask you that. How do you go about really getting the very best people for those customer service agents?
Yeah, so it's different looking for customer service agents versus the non-customer care team hires.
Right.
On
Right.
the customer care team side, we've built out kind of a green flags, basically it's an assessment.
Right.
So we'll test you and ask you certain questions to make sure that you're aligned with the mission, but also to make sure that you're going to like the job.
Yeah.
It is a difficult job to be a customer care agent. You're
Sure.
answering, hundreds of phone calls a day. Most of them are very nice. Some of them are not, right?
Right.
And
Right.
you've got to be able to deal with that pressure from customers live and be able to de-escalate. And it's a remote position as well, and you're sitting in front of a computer, and so
Right.
sometimes if you have, for example, worked at a grocery store and you're on your feet all day, and you've never done a job like this, we want to make sure that you're going to actually enjoy it, because if you enjoy your job, you're going to be better at it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's an assessment that looks at, are you right for the job? Are we right for you?
Is
And
it kind
then
of a psychographic? Do they take it online and
they take it
yeah,
online.
you've
Yeah.
got some measurements that you
Hmm.
kind of record people against? Okay. Got it.
Exactly.
Great.
And then we have also a red flags list. And so we're
Hmm.
constantly checking from the hiring process, all even through training process, that if we see anything, any red flags, that we raise it,
Right.
we discuss it. One of the core tenets of our company is being very direct and offering lots of feedback often
Yeah.
and consistently. And then, if it doesn't work out, then we say this is not the right choice for both of us. Here's why, and always,
And do they do that on the job, or is that actually part of the interview process?
it's part of the interview
Yeah.
process all the way through training.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, even there's folks who don't make it past training, right? Because at that
Right.
point we can see, are you up for the task? Can you handle some of the pressures of the job, et cetera? And so we train our trainers to look for some of these qualities, and then
Yeah.
we'll flag out the high performers, and we'll try to
Sure.
figure out, well, what's really great about that person, and how do they respond, and how can we learn from them so that we can implement some of these things into the scripts that we use or into the training materials and things like that.
Yeah. Awesome. And do you guys have an executive suite in place? Kind of how do you, go beyond, you and Jonathan's running the day to day? Do you have a head of finance or
Hmm.
head of operations, or are you two pretty much divide and conquer and have a kind of lower level support team for everything else?
Yeah, we've got basically four major kind of executives. So it's
Right.
me, who's the CEO. John is the COO. We've got a CMO who manages the marketing team and
Right.
helps me manage the analytics team as well. And then we also have my chief of staff, who's just absolutely critical in
Right.
helping us execute on a lot of these higher level strategic goals that we've set out to
Yeah.
accomplish. And then our chief of staff also, she used to be our director of customer experience.
Ah.
And
Yeah.
so she still, is relatively hands-on. We do have a director now who's great, who's taken her position, who our chief of staff, our current chief of staff, trained and went through the entire customer care process as an agent, all
Awesome.
the way to director. And so that's one of the parts of the business that we're so proud of and thankful
Yeah.
that we took our time uh, to build from scratch and iterate constantly
Right.
to get it to where it needs to be. And we still have a long ways to go. But for the size of company we're at, I think we do a really excellent job in that department.
Every company kind of goes through growing pains, Bianca. What have been some of the biggest challenges you've had in these 4 or 5 years of operations?
Ooh, well, there's every single day
Where
is
to start,
challenges,
right?
and there's, small challenges can eat up as much as your time as big challenges. And so
Sure.
I think the main challenge is time and prioritization and making sure that our team members know what the priorities are, and making sure that they're executing on that. Two, hiring the right team members is difficult in an environment like this, right? Where, I mean, we're setting out, first of all, to do something that no one else has done before, right? No one has created an e-commerce high-touch experience that is dedicated to serving and supporting family caregivers at home. So that's one, right? It's like we're trying to figure that out. But two, we're trying to grow, in what normal companies grow 20 to 40 years in 6 or 7.
Wow.
Right? So it's a lot more pressure. We have to be very focused on metrics and tracking everything to make sure that we are able to meet the goals that we've set out to meet. And that environment is difficult. It's like being in a pressure cooker, because you've got to be, again, tackling the small things and also focused on the big things, and you've got to do it really, really quickly. And if you mess up, you got to fix it and move on really quickly. So it doesn't give you a lot of time to decompress. And so, one of the challenges is making sure that we try to explain to people, what it is that we're here for in the job description, the KPIs that we're looking for, the type of growth that we're looking to meet, so that they come in and they know what to expect. And then two, how do you keep a positive attitude when you're doing something just so challenging, and how do you keep team morale up? And so I think we've done a great job at doing this and setting our care values right up front, and establishing KPIs and baselines, and making sure that people know if they're doing a good job or a bad job, and being direct on how to help them grow. And so there's plenty of challenges. I think that the biggest two have been, people, and prioritization.
How about leadership? Have you seen shifts already in your leadership style over these last 4 or 5 years?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Tell us about some of those.
So I think I mentioned already, really transitioning to everything being metrics based. I think it gives a lot more clarity to what you should be focused on every day, and we have this concept where everybody is reporting on a daily basis their metrics publicly, right? And
do you have
what
a
that helps.
dashboard that you and Jonathan
We have,
manage? Or?
Yeah, some of it is automated, and our analytics team started about 3 months ago, and they've done an excellent job. Basically whipping the data into shape, because that's a challenge in itself, but also making it user friendly and creating these dashboards. So some of it is automated, and some of it our team members still have to go in and manually pull on a daily basis. And so everybody reports their metrics on a daily basis and tracks where we are, and tries to figure out, if we're behind or if we're ahead, well, why, and explain that to the team so we can provide context, or we can make suggestions on how we can work better together. And so trying to be really collaborative, because it's a team effort. Merchandising can't be successful without marketing. Marketing can't be successful without CX. CX can't be successful without HR. And, trying to bring a lot of clarity to the job.
Well, you're still fairly small, 35, 45 total employees today?
Oh, we have like 75, maybe 80.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah,
We've been growing a lot, I think, since I last spoke to you.
Yeah, I can imagine. And do you have town halls? Do you bring people together? How do you kind of disseminate culture and information?
Yeah, it's a great question. So before, we would have basically, I believe it was quarterly or monthly all hands. But when we went remote and the team got bigger and bigger, and not everyone was able to go to every meeting or be part of every decision, we decided to do all hands on a weekly basis so that everyone was caught up. And then we just pulled that back to on a bi-weekly basis. And so that's helped kind of, set timelines and communicate, well, here's the roadmap for HR and here's the roadmap for, engineering. And let's make sure that we're all aware of what's happening so that we can coordinate efforts, so that we can ask the right questions and we can know who to go for information. So that's been really helpful. And, apart from that, it's we've got management guidelines that we've created. So everyone in the company has one-on-ones with their direct reports on a weekly basis, and everyone's responsible for tracking their own success and owning that, right? You're responsible for tracking your own metrics. You're responsible for your one-on-ones, and that's kind of how we run our business.
Right. And, culture is so important. And of course, it does pretty much flow from the CEOs. Hey, tell us a little bit about, how would you describe the Carewell culture and, what's the wow about the company that attracts and keeps people there?
Yeah. So the first thing is, everybody who joins our company has to be mission aligned, which is an easy thing, I think, for us, right? Because we're helping caregivers and I think 75% of Americans are going to be caregivers at one point in their lives. So everyone knows a caregiver or you've been a caregiver, and you have personal experience with it, right? And so it's very mission aligned, very mission oriented. Two, it's very positive. We're always, praising each other. We've got a kudos channel. We try to make it, again, it's difficult what we're trying to accomplish, and the lighter that we can make it and the more positive we can make it, I think the nicer of a time you'll have trying to accomplish something really hard. And three, I think we're very collaborative. Like I mentioned, you can't work in a silo and be successful. And there's so many good ideas from everybody at every level of the company. And we try to keep it, very open, and sometimes, we'll throw out dumb ideas on purpose just to get people comfortable, because that's really where creativity comes from, right? It's through comfort, and it's through bad ideas that become great ones. And so, I think if I were to sum it up, that's what it would be.
What are some of the key characteristics that you look for in that recruiting process? I mean, I know we've talked a little bit about how you go about doing it. You've got the online training and so forth, but if you kind of just synthesized it down to the two or three things that really make a difference, particularly with the folks that are on the customer care team, what would those things be?
Yeah, so mission alignment, why Carewell? What are the other jobs that you're looking for to see, are they aligned similarly to what we do and to our service?
Right. Or are they just looking for another job?
Yeah. Exactly, right? Two, do you have attention to detail, right? Are you trying to understand the broader context as to what's happening, within a situation? And then three, how would you handle situation and just putting them in situationals and trying to get, their honest feedback and what they would do. And that's kind of the best we could do. And again, we go through that assessment. There's, multiple rounds of interviews, and sometimes we get it right and sometimes we get it wrong. Sometimes you can't tell till someone's on the job. And we also have, I think I alluded to in the management framework, we've got 30, 60, 90s. So, on the 30th day, we'll the manager meets with the individual or the new hire on the 60th and on the 90th day to provide that constant and consistent feedback. And then typically, we'll know if somebody's, a hit or a miss within the first 60 days.
Pretty quick. Yeah. Now, are you doing a lot of the interviewing still? Do you get involved in that, or is that more kind of down the line of authority, so to speak?
Yeah, it depends. So on CX, I'm not involved at all anymore. I haven't been for quite a while since, Jonathan, my co-founder, who's the COO, manages that side. So he was involved and hired, the first, 10 or 20 agents. And then now we've got an HR team, and they go through a lot of the screenings and the processes, and then they'll tie in the customer care team manager as well as the director and the trainer to make sure that they're all aligned, that this person would be a successful candidate. So it's a very hands-off process, but again, they're following a lot of the processes and the procedures that we set up by doing it ourselves.
But you do get involved from time to time, maybe I'm certainly in a direct report or maybe one or two levels
absolutely.
down.
Yeah. So I still have communication.
What do you zero in on? What kind of questions do you ask? What gives you the most insight?
Yeah, I always look for, entrepreneurialness, if that's even a word, right? So, what did you accomplish? Have you started businesses before? Have you been interested in doing that? And that gives me a lot of insight because, I'm an entrepreneur myself. A lot of the people who have been very successful here are the ones who who think like that, right? Like a small business. We don't have all the resources. We don't have a massive engineering team. So a lot of times you're going to have to figure it out by finding a piece of software that can do the job of an engineer for you. Or, you're just going to have to write up a job description yourself because we don't have an entire HR department to be, creating those things. And so seeing, how down and dirty somebody can get, as well as, exactly.
Cool.
And so, level of ownership is very important. The mission alignment, like I mentioned, that's across the board for everybody. And then there is this level of which, I think you asked me earlier, how has kind of your leadership or what are some of the things that you've learned? I think one of the things I've learned is that it's really important to, I don't know how else to say this other than like to vibe with the person that you're going to be working with, right? It should feel like you can be open and honest.
Right?
Yeah, exactly, right? And so sometimes, you don't click and that's okay, right? That's a good thing, right? That not everyone's going to click. And so we're looking for that factor of like, could you mesh well with our team? Could we work with you? Are you open to receiving feedback? How do you respond to feedback? Can you handle, high pressure situations, tracking metrics? Is that there's some people who are drawn to that. And then there's some people who just absolutely, that's not for them. And that's great. That's just not Carewell. So a lot of these, discussions that we have with candidates and a lot of the green flags and red flags, we want to make sure that we are, that they are a good fit for us, but also that we're a good fit for them. And so we have, these processes across the board, not just in CX, but also across the rest of the team.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, we're just about out of time, but we always ask our CEO guests one last question, Bianca, and that's what kind of career and life advice would you give to someone who maybe has their eyes on the corner office themselves coming up through an organization, or like you, has some entrepreneurial tendencies and wants to run their own company someday?
I mean, do it. I think a lot of it's really scary.
Just do it. Try it, right?
But you don't need anything to start a business. It's nice to know accounting. It's nice to know these things, but you can always ask for advice. One of the things that I think has been most surprising to me is how open people are to advising and mentoring people that they don't even know, people like me. And the best, and I always say, like, I've spent a lot of money. I've put all of my savings into this business, versus going and getting my MBA. And I can assure you that this is a much more practical, realistic, and, it's definitely more difficult. But a lot of it is having the courage and the bravery to just do it and know that at the end of it, you're going to walk away with skills that you would have otherwise never had, and experiences that, you can take away. And if it doesn't work out, you're going to have something, that you didn't have before. Exactly.
Well, Bianca Padilla, co-founder and CEO of Carewell, thank you so much for sharing your journey into the corner office.
Thank you again so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to Into the Corner Office with Brant Hanley. We hope you enjoyed hearing our guest CEO story as much as we did. If you want to hear more CEOs reveal their journey into the corner office, please subscribe via iTunes and tell your friends and colleagues. For more information about Brant, Resource Options International, and the mighty middle market, visit www.goforroi.com. We look forward to having you join us for our next episode.